Hey everyone, welcome back. In this lesson, we are going to get to work on our categories view right here. So you can see this is the final product. We have our categories listed out here in a collection view. So that is what we are going to be working on in this and the next lesson. So let's get started. We're going to come down to our main.storyboard here in the Artable project. And we have here our simple start to our storyboard. This right here is our home VC. This is where our categories are going to live. And so the first thing that we want to do is add our background image. Okay, so I'm going to open up our object library here and just search for image and pull in an image view. And let's go ahead and add some constraints. So we're going to be going 0 from the left, 0 from the top, 0 from the right, and then for the bottom, we want it to extend under the safe area. So I'm going to select here and choose view, and then set that to 0. And we'll say add those 4 constraints. And it doesn't look like it quite did that correctly for the bottom. So I'm going to delete that again, move it up a little bit, set the constraint again, and select view. And that should work this time. Select it, change it to 0, and add that constraint. There we go. Now it's filling up that whole bottom area. And the image that we want to use for this is called, let's see here, is it BG Cat 3? Okay, so cat stands for category, and that is our image right there. And we want it to be aspect fill. And you can kind of experiment with how you want it to be. You could do aspect fill, aspect fit. I guess aspect fit doesn't really work. Maybe center. You can find kind of the location of the image that you think looks the best. I'm going to go with aspect fill. And then we're going to drop this alpha value all the way down to 0.2. And again, you can kind of play with that alpha value and set it to the darkness or the transparency that you think looks good. All right, very good. So now we have our background image. Next thing that we're going to need is a collection view. So again, opening up our object library, and I'm going to pull in a collection view. All right, and let's go ahead and add some constraints. Going to say 20 from the left, 0 from the top, 20 from the right, and then uncheck constraint margins here and go down to the view and say 0 and add those 4 constraints. There we go, very good. Now, typically in our past lessons when we've been working with table views and collection views, we set up our cell UI right here in the storyboard with inside of the collection view. For these lessons, we are not going to do that. And the reason for that is, one, it gives us a little bit more control. I think it clutters up the storyboard less, but the big reason is that we are going to be using these same cells between our admin project and our customer project, okay? So we're going to have zibs that we register to our collection views that will be common between our 2 projects. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete this collection view cell right here. Make sure you have the collection view cell selected when you click on delete, and go ahead and delete that. All right, then the next thing that I want to do is go ahead and set the background to clear color. And then I'm going to uncheck the horizontal and vertical scrolling indicators. And that should be good for our collection view for now. Next thing I want to add is an activity indicator. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag that straight into our view right here. I'm going to put it above the collection view. And then I'm going to move the collection view above the activity indicator, just because sometimes you have a little bit of issues getting it in the right hierarchical order, but we do want it below the collection view in the hierarchy here so that it's in front of the collection view. And with that selected, I'm going to go ahead and align this. We'll do horizontally in container and vertically and add those 2 constraints. And then up here in its attributes inspector, we're going to change the style to large white and change the color to our red that we've been using. and then check hides when stopped. And again, that just makes it nice so that when we tell it to stop animating, it also hides, and when we tell it to start animating, it automatically shows. And I think that just about does it for our UI that we need for this part right here. So let's go ahead and open up our home VC in the assistant editor, holding Option and clicking on home VC, and we can go ahead and hook up our IB outlets. I'm gonna go ahead and close this right and left panel here, give us a little bit more room. And selecting here, let's grab our collection view. So I'm gonna select from our view hierarchy here. I'm gonna hold Control and drag. And we're just gonna call this collection view and say connect. And then for the activity indicator, I'm gonna select that, Control and drag, and say activity indicator and say connect. Very good. Those are our outlets we're going to need. I'm going to reopen our left and right panes here and go back to our standard editor and then come to our home vc.swift file. All right, so we've added our UI, and let's take a look at our simulator again for our finished app. We have here our categories, okay? Now, we're going to be pulling these down from Firestore, and so we need a model. We need a struct that can contain the information that we need to present here. So looking at this, I can at least see two things that we're going to need. We're going to need an image URL, probably a title. Some other things is we're going to be ordering this by timestamp. So we're going to need a timestamp and probably a couple other things. So let's go ahead and create our model for the categories. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab this model folder that we have here. There's nothing in it yet. And I'm going to move that up here to the shared folder because all of the models that we're going to be creating will be used across both of the projects, okay? So here under model, I'm going to go ahead and right click and say new file. And this is just going to be a Swift file. And so we're going to say next. I'm going to call this category and say create. We can also add this to be for both targets right here and say create. All right, very good. Let's go ahead and create our struct. Okay, we're going to, again, we're naming this category. And we talked about a few of the fields that we're going to need to represent our categories. It's going to need a name. That's of type string. We're going to store the ID, and this is the Firestore ID, which we'll talk about more in a few lessons. All right, so we're going to store the ID. We're going to need an image URL so that we can display the image. We're going to have a Boolean here called isActive, and this is going to be a Boolean, and we're going to default its value to true. And so what we can do is using this isActive Boolean, if you want to ever turn off or on specific categories as the store owner, then you can do that right here, and then those won't show up in the customer's apps. And then finally, we're going to be ordering our products and categories by the date that they are added. So we are going to need a timestamp, and that is going to be of type. We need to import Firestore here. So I'm going to say import Firestore. And then that is timestamp right there. Perfect, so now we have our model that will represent our categories and that we will be able to initialize instances of this category from the data that we pull down from our Firestore database. So I think this is a good place to stop for now. Just to recap, we created our category model and we added our UI for our home view controller where we are displaying our categories. All right, so in the next one, we will continue working on this and I'll see you there.